Öncelikle akşamın 7.
Welcome everyone. It is 7 p.m. I'm sure you are all tired, but thank you very much for being with me. I don't want to increase your feeling of tiredness, but it is great to have a multidisciplinary work, because as physicians you have always felt bad because you were saying, oh, I'm doing something very bad. Am I giving harm to my patient? On one side you feel very bad about yourself, and that feeling gives you the need to learn new things. So it triggers you to do great things and learn new things, read new information, but on the other side it increases your concern and anxiety. So having multidisciplinary work is definitely great in order to balance that. So with mutual negotiation and exchange of information you can get better result. This is from the inpatient units, and also we wanted to compare the normal outpatients. Of course, hospitalized patients covered all children hospital, and we also wanted to see our own clinical patients in order to carry out a comparative study. And majority of the findings have all been submitted, but I want to mention a physician perspective. How can we evaluate these findings from a physician perspective? I don't want to make you too tired. As I've stated, this is the flow of my presentation. If you want, I can be slow in some places, I can be faster in other parts. So for polypharmacy, there is the simultaneous use of multiple drugs. This is the definition. But when you look at the articles on the literature, you can see different articles, different names, and you might not know when you are carrying out polypharmacy for your patients, and when I should be focusing on polypharmacy, or else when I should ignore polypharmacy. There is a confusion. When does a kid use polypharmacy? Generally, it comes in two ways. Primarily, if a kid is using psychotropic-drug, by the way, they are not in a small jar, they have been given different medications. Is it polypharmacy? Is it inside the indication, or is it out the indication in terms of comorbid diseases? Which situation could be defined as polypharmacy? In the literature there is confusion. For us this is even more important, because polypharmacy, by the way, it has been stated before me very well in terms of the interactions of the drugs. It can create great impact, and it increases the side effects a lot. So when we look at the years before 2000, it was mainly related to elderly and intensive care unit patients. Before 2000, child adolescents were also found to be very risky. So in the literature you do not see only polypharmacy, especially when you go back to 2000s. At the very beginning of 2000, you can see a lot of different terms that were replaced by polypharmacy, that were used instead of polypharmacy. So who identified which name in what aspect? This changes a lot. But polypharmacy, yes, on one side, clinically speaking, increases our therapeutic strength, but on the other side, it also brings possible risks. It comprises of possible harms, and our principal rule is not to harm the patient, and there's a dilemma here. So we have to give decision per patient. Let's talk about this definition more and more. I'll try to define it to you. I'll try to read it to you, because not two studies have the same polypharmacy definition. So according to what that definition changes on the child group, on the pediatric groups, for instance, the number of the medication, the duration of the medication usage, is it according to the molecule of the drug, or else is it the group of the drug? Antipsychotics and antidepressants, is it polypharmacy, or else is it polypharmacy if you use antipsychotics together. It changes a lot. It is also related to the medical condition and medication class, clinical setting, inpatient, outpatient. So there are different definitions brought by the clinicians. As I've already mentioned, certain questions can come to my mind. For instance, an asthma patient, if he is given 3 drugs, is it called as polypharmacy? Or else if a patient has multi-organ failure and given 5 different drugs, is it polypharmacy? Or else a child with ADHD taking 2 medications, are all these children receiving polypharmacy? So to what extent should I be thinking of the details of my treatment? So in adults, roughly speaking, it was, by the way, from 2017, it was the recent systematic review. I think a rough consensus was given. So 5 or more medication simultaneous usage is described as polypharmacy. But the World Health Organization has lacks of details. It says simultaneous use of more than 1 drug. Is it psychotropic or is it related to disease? There is no clear definition. We do not know them yet. For how many days? What is the reason? What is the magnitude? We don't have any other opinion. They say that if it is more than 2 drugs, it is described as polypharmacy, but different definitions could also be brought. And in the trials that we have come across, there are many other challenges. Nadir has mentioned that switching from one antidepressant to another one, especially in the pediatrics area, there is no switch on antidepressants. There is a switch on the antipsychotics, and we have to. I have to have the cross titrate within a week or within 2 weeks, for instance. So what should I do if I try to decrease a dosage of an antipsychotic and if I want to increase the other antipsychotic? So what is going to happen? Actually, this can only be answered while you can make research on that. Another trial from 2017, 110 adult studies were reviewed, and in 110 adult studies, 138 unique definitions of polypharmacy were found, but then 51 definitions were agreed upon. Then they reported polypharmacy as 5 or more medication usage. And in adults, there was 90 or more days polypharmacy usage, but the numbers are very changeable. So when it comes to pediatric group, we have to look at the bigger perspective of the definitions. Nesli Gülen mentioned the pattern of this design, but I would like to look at it from another perspective. So how did polypharmacy change based on the outpatient pediatric groups? So they looked at polypharmacy exposure. If it is 2 to 5 medications, it is low. 5 to 9, it is medium. And if it is above 10 medication, it is high. And they have also checked out the depth of the polypharmacy. 1 to 30 days, low depth. And if it is above 30 days, high depth drug interaction. And Chan et al. Defined outpatient pediatric psychotropic polymorphisy as 2 concurrent medications. And also that interval is given for drug cross titrations. So another big trial, if you have a look at that, they have made something very different. When they were evaluating polypharmacy, they looked at the daily medication usage or else elongated extended hospital stay. But when you look at the world literature, when you scan all those articles on the pediatric group, polypharmacy prevalence is between 18 and 100% scale. So it is a very wide spectrum. This is rather new from 2018. So at the very end, they have reached upon a very similar points in the pediatric areas. They wanted to give a standardized definition because they cannot make a comparison if the definitions are not similar. It is only about the definition. So they have evaluated all the trials of the literature with respect to polypharmacy. So in the world, all of those full text articles were brought together in this review. There were 1,000 articles, but majority of them were excluded due to technical failures, and at the very end 363 studies were evaluated. By the way, we have to look at it from another perspective. What do we know about pediatric polypharmacy? There is 363 studies. At the very end, what are we going to learn more? So as of 2018, our knowledge about polypharmacy are generally cross-sectional or retrospective. Generally, they are at the outpatient group, and maybe it is very important for us to feel good about ourselves. Neuropsychiatrists and psychiatrists are interested in this issue with respect to drug-drug interactions and polypharmacy's possible harms. Here you can see 18.5% of diseases of studies are with epilepsy patients and psychiatric patients, and 9% of psychosomatic disordered children were enrolled to the study. So generally neurologists and psychiatrists were interested in these studies. So what don't we know about the patients? We don't know much about inpatients. Generally, psychiatry and epilepsy are evaluated, so we are trying to see the possible interaction of two drugs that are effective on the central nervous system. Yes, we have more information about them, but when it comes to the agents out of central nervous system, we don't know much about them because there are not many documentations about them. Generally, our interest area and CNS-related disorders, when these two have an interaction, we are not sure about the drug interactions as well. So basically, this is a very important area that we have to increase our knowledge. But it seems to me in that way, maybe we have to look at it from a liaison perspective, consultation perspective. This is the real world. Yes, in the real world, we have outpatients coming to our clinic, but we are asking about the underlying conditions. And even though they are outpatient group, they have many comorbidities, asthma, allergic asthma, and some other medications that they administer continuously, or else in one of their organ systems, even though it is very less, there is damage or some chronic diseases because the patient's life expectancy is increased. So this is the real polypharmacy. This is the polypharmacy of the real world. We cannot come across with pure epilepsy patients or else pure psychiatry patients because they have comorbidities. And this is how I evaluated the definitions here. Majority of these trials are in compliance with World Health Organization. 81% of the trials include 2 or more medication usage as polypharmacy. When it comes to the duration, here you can see 63% not reported. This is not reported. They actually didn't deal with the duration up until now. In the scientific trials, we haven't tried to come up with the duration of the multi-drug usage. I think it's a great clue that we need to work on this area. So, in the psychiatry area, it is plenty. As you can see here, 2 or 3 drugs simultaneous use. I'm not sure whether pointer points out that a usage of more than 2 or 3 drugs to a longer period of time is described as polypharmacy. This is a summary of the first part. Right now, we have to be obliged with World Health Organization definition. If 2 drugs or more medications are used, then it is defined as polypharmacy. This is the most common definition. And there are also many other reviews to be made on the definition, because there is no consensus. Otherwise, we cannot make any comparison of the trials made in this aspect. Only 15% of the studies evaluate polypharmacy without limiting it to particular medications or disease conditions. These are the drugs that are out of the central nerve system effects. And drug-drug interactions were evaluated in those trials, but Nadir has mentioned that beforehand compliance of the polypharmacy of the patient and the results, outcomes, to what extent results have been affected. Literature is not very much satisfying. So in the DDIs and ADS. So what are the drug-drug interactions and adverse drug events? These are mainly adult studies, but we can say that drug-drug interactions are important cause for adverse drug events. Up to 5% of potential and preventable adverse events were associated with drug-drug interactions. This is from the world literature again. Why is that important for us? Because due to drug-drug interaction, adverse events that we confront with could be prevented beforehand if we keep them on our minds. We can prevent those adverse events. That's why I think these are very crucial for us. This has been already mentioned, that's why I'm going to skip it very fast. On the psychiatry, on the inpatient side, discharge and polypharmacy is very much related, but on the long term, psychiatrists are much more preclined to provide monotherapy, because after a while the number of medications decreases. So in very long study, stimulants with another psychotropic medication is the most frequent polypharmacy example that we see. So approximately 600 children from the hospitalized group, 200 of them were given psychotropic medications, by the way. And we have to look at the patient's primary psychiatric disordered one. They were 17%. Generally anorexia nervosa, and 17% of them have primary psychiatric diseases, and the rest of them are suffering from multi-childhood pediatric diseases. 24.5% is the psychotropic polypharmacy amount, but the total number of drugs are higher. Generally, they are on 7 or more medications, and psychotropic drug interaction is 15.77%. When we use two psychotropes, are we really taking drug-drug interaction into consideration, because we have already decreased the DDI rate? This is psychotrope DDIs. This is the most common polypharmacy-related potential DDIs. When I combine the two drugs here, I can estimate that prolongation will take place on QTC. Fluoxetine, olanzapine combined preparates are also available in the market. I know that I have to use it, but do I get measures? Do I get some precautions? Do I get the ECG of the patient? Or else do I do the very same thing after the usage? Do I get the measurement of the QTC? Because there is no rule that I'm not going to use these drugs together, but I have to know the potential DDI effects, and I need to take required precautions. Psychotrope interaction, or else psychotrope non-psychotrope drug interaction. Which one is more important for us? I was trying to figure it out, and I looked at the literature and came up with this article from 2012. So here in the general hospital inpatient groups and in the psychiatric hospital inpatient groups, and cumulative results of all patients are also evaluated. In the psychiatric hospital patients, their rate being affected by DDI is related to paroxetine and omeprazole. So again, in the psychiatric hospitals, amitriptyline related DDI interaction has been found very high. But in what patient group we found odds ratio higher? In fluoxetine and aspirin and cisfluroxetine. So here, Stockholm enzyme, Stockholm enzyme were found, and we were students, so we were comfortable. We knew these drugs. We know these drugs, especially on the Stockholm. If they get the interaction, we know the possible drug-drug interactions, and we can actually be careful. And I think when we administer these drugs, we need to be more careful because we know our own drugs' potential effects. If we add carbamazepine, we all know what the possible outcome will be. But when it comes to chronic pediatric patients with polymorphisy, sometimes we see such lists that, for instance, hematology patient has 17 drugs, and some of those drugs are not familiar to me at all. I haven't heard those names at all. So we have to know the drugs better, and if we know drugs better, then we can see less counter interaction effects. I think I have taken much of your time, but without further ado, I'll give you the data. Nadir mentioned that beforehand, but I want to add it again. Here, psychotropic usage in hematology and emergency room is lower. However, the biggest DDI takes place in emergency service and hematology department. We need to be more careful when we recommend psychotropics in emergency department and hematology department. Total patients in our trial is 200 and 166 medically ill, and the others are psychiatric patients. So these are the observed contraindicated drug pairs. Here you can see them on the slide, and these are the psychotrop initiated children. There is no contraindication psychotrop pair. Psychotrops and non-psychotrops are contraindicated. This is the area that we have to be careful. And another thing, that are these familiar to us? Are these drugs known by us? Are these side effects or adverse events known to us? And what are the pathways? Because there could be certain other ways that we do not know for these adverse events to take place. Anti-infective agents must be approached with very big caution. Here, maybe it is in the next chart. Here you see antifungal medications. We know that we are trained in our psychiatry education. We can get great side effects even with metoclopramide by itself. I think we are very much educated with QT prolongation because we take care of our ECG follow-up, but we have to remember them again and again, and we have to be thinking our long-term follow-up based on that. So these are the major DDI pairs. We have very few number of contraindications, but here, this is the major DDI chart. Here, 2 psychotrop agent use is seen at this chart, but 2 psychotropic agent administration, you're going to see that here. Generally, it is related to SSRI and antipsychotic combination. At the very end, QT prolongation takes place. The possible side effect is QT prolongation, and we have to ask for ECG follow-up. This is what we need to do. So all in all, if I'm to sum it up, polypharmacy, if we are obliged to go on with polypharmacy, if we can't proceed with monotherapy, if there are some other disorders of the children, we have to be very careful about their primary disease, which organ system is involved, because according to the involved organ system, at which stage of the medication, possible discharge, penetration or side effects could be foreseen. This is what we need to do. Okay, I'm going to conclude my speech in a minute. Apart from that, we have to avoid from polypharmacy. We have to be on the monotherapy side. But if we are obliged to do so, we have to bear certain things on our mind, like possible side effects and adverse events. In advance, we have to know them and take proper precautions and follow the patients according to those side effects. Then we need to document all the data at the very end so that we can share all these documents with one another. I believe it's going to carry us to better clinical results. Thank you very much for your attention.